Hello, Holly. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation. It's such a pleasure to have you here at the SAF Global Summit 2025.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So today we are really excited to hear your insights on Virgin Atlantic's SAF milestone and its growing global energy transition of the aviation industry. As we all know, Virgin Atlantic has made history with a Flight 100 in November 2023, the first ever transatlantic flight on 100% SAF. So looking back, what do you see as the most important lessons from that achievement for the wider aviation industry?
So I think there's probably a few things I draw out. I think firstly, kind of demonstrating that it's possible. That was one of the big things we wanted to do when taking on the challenge, to demonstrate that SAF at 100% drop in existing engines, airframes, infrastructure is possible. So I think kind of giving a really demonstrable proof point was really important to us. I think secondly, I'd say kind of the impact it had as kind of a catalyst across stakeholders. And I'll start kind of within those who are within the sector, right? It demonstrated that in a single flight, we achieved a 64% life cycle reduction in emissions. That's equivalent in a single flight, as I say, to all improvements that have been achieved through engine evolution since the dawn of the jet age. So I think demonstrating the possibility and the opportunity of SAF was really important. Another key learning we took from it was kind of the impact of the fuel around a particles perspective. So things that are important, non-CO2 emissions that are important to contrail formation, local air quality. We showed that the fuel we used had a 40% reduction. And I think particularly as we're looking at an expanded world in the UK with airport expansion, kind of demonstrating that there are non-carbon tangible benefits of SAF was really important. And thirdly, I think it just demonstrated kind of the power of collaboration. And I think we all recognise that the challenge of decarbonisation for our sector is a systems one, and there needs to be radical collaboration across the energy value chain. And I think we really demonstrated that actually when you come together in a short space of kind of 12 months, you can achieve some real milestones that resonate with people.
So, Oli, thank you so much for all of your takeaways from the key lesson that we can learn from Virgin Atlantic. So, speaking of the specific project, the Flight 100 was made possible by a consortium of partners, including Boeing, Rolls-Royce, Imperial College, RMI, and others. So, how do you see this kind of cross-sector collaboration evolving, and what role must they play in scaling the SAF production?
Yeah, so I think it was really important when we thought about Flight 100 from our perspective of ensuring that we had representation, not just from the airline, but from the OEMs, from the engine producers, roles played by Boeing and Rolls-Royce, but also, as you say, from kind of the academia side, so that we could show kind of real verification of data and worked across that kind of spectrum that wasn't just an airline point of view. I think going forward, that type of collaboration is going to be fundamentally important if we're going to achieve both the 10% SAF target in the UK in 2030 and also kind of net zero 2050. And I think what underpins it for me is not just having kind of a coalition of the willing, people who are willing to set an ambition and try and deliver action against that, but also in the context of thinking about how we catalyse this market, we know there are going to have to be novel modes of risk share to ensure that we can get from where we are today to kind of a world where we have construction, productions and supply of SAF at scale.
Right now, SAF makes up less than 0.5% of the global jet fuel. So what do you see as the biggest roadblock to scaling the production? Is it technology, feedstock, cost, or policy?
I think all of them have a role to play in that mix. I think for me, looking at where we are now, kind of policy is the biggest lever. We've seen kind of material progress in the UK over the last 24 to 18 kind of months. We've got an introduction of a SAF mandate. I think we as an airline have always been supportive of the role a mandate has to play. It is a consolidation of clear voluntary demand signals into something that is more tangible. However, I think we have always said as an industry, and you see these models elsewhere in the EU and in the US, that you also need to see some level of supply side support so that we have enough investor confidence to get the financing we need to get kind of plants into production. So I think what we see here in the UK on the horizon is now the introduction of an RCM, revenue certainty mechanism, hopefully in legislation by the end of the year. And that should give a mechanism whereby we're bolstering investor confidence. Which to date has kind of said we support a mandate that is good, but in and of itself, it is not enough to kind of mitigate kind of the risks they see from an investment perspective in some of these plants.
Yes. So, as you just mentioned, it has been really clear that policy and government support are crucial to scaling this up. So, from your perspective, what specific policy levers, like mandates, incentives, policy support, are most urgent to unlock the investment in this industry?
So I think policy that really tackles the supply side. We have a mandate in force. It is effective. I think here in the UK, we have a mandate that evolves quite rapidly over time. So we move from 2% this year to 10% by 2030. And as we get to kind of 2027, we start to see a mix in the type of fuel that is required.
Yes.
So today we are meeting our SAF mandate essentially with first generation heifers. We know that kind of 98% of that is imported. Here in the UK, we have an ambition to kind of lead the world, if you like, in second generation production. And I think, with that mandate starting to come into the horizon for 2027, we know that it's fundamental both for the carbon opportunity, the environmental benefit, but also the industrial opportunity that exists for the UK, that we really start to see some plants coming into construction here in the UK. So I think I would still say that the biggest lever for me from a policy perspective remains that revenue certainty mechanism, so we can really start to see plants move to final investment decisions and construction as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective on policy. So, how do you communicate SAF's importance to your passengers or the cooperated customers? And do you see the demand side pressure from either climate conscious traveler or business as a driver of this change?
So this one for me is a really difficult area. And in fact, probably in terms of challenges we are facing, it's second only to kind of the supply and cost challenge that I've already spoken about. I think there are different sets of consumers, right? And I think when we think about our corporate customers, some who are, progressive in how they think about their own carbon footprint, there is an opportunity, and we've had, examples of doing this where we partner with them for the purchase of SAF, which allows us to share the premium and for them to play a role in catalyzing the market. So I think that's a material move from corporate customers that we've seen over the past couple of years. When we come to kind of consumers at large, I think that's quite a difficult place to be. And I think what we saw off the back of Flight 100 was 98% positive engagement. So we know awareness is there. We also saw kind of more than 6,000 media kind of hits around the flight. Again, just kind of reinforcing that there is interest out there for what the sector is doing to decarbonize. And thirdly, we saw kind of a material uplift in kind of how we were viewed as a brand from a purpose perspective. And given who we are as Virgin Atlantic, innovation, disruptor kind of mindset at the core, continuing to kind of push the boundaries is something that remains important to us. Translating that into the day-to-day for a consumer is really quite challenging. And I think what we know from the polling we have done is that around 70% of customers say sustainability is a material consideration, actually first order consideration when they are thinking about travel. We know that willingness to pay is low, and we know that actually kind of sustainability performance of an airline isn't in the top 5 drivers of purchase decision. And we also know that, from polling that's been done, that more than 60% of people think travel companies have a bias to greenwash. So we're kind of leaning into quite a difficult landscape and finding a way to engage our customers, educate them, give them the information they need, provide the certainty that we are taking the action we need to, and then translating that into here's an offer for you. And actually some of it comes with a cost, and getting that balance right in terms of what information we're giving the consumer, how we're engaging on that front, and then how we're translating that into share some of the increased cost we're seeing is quite a difficult place to be. And I think really for Virgin Atlantic at this point in time, where we have, big ambition and we are trying to drive action, but we know there's more to do. It's really about transparency, trying to be as clear as possible, as accountable as possible, whether we're talking to our corporate customers or we're dealing with kind of our consumers, those who are buying direct for themselves. It's just ensuring that we are holding ourselves to account and being transparent where we get it right and also where we get it wrong.
Yes. So last question for you, Holly. If we were to meet again in 2030, what milestone would you want the Virgin Atlantic and even the wider industry to have achieved in SAF and aviation decarbonization?
I think for Virgin Atlantic, what I'd like to see is, we've got some levers that come before SAF. In fact, the industry has, and that's what you do with your fleet. Virgin Atlantic today is a leader in fleet transformation. More than 80% of our capacity is flown on next generation aircraft, the most fuel efficient and therefore carbon efficient that there is in the market. By 2028, that will be 100%, and ensuring that we deliver on that milestone is hugely important to us. I think when we come to kind of the next order levers of decarbonisation, SAF for us as a long haul only airline is materially important. And I'd like to see us, be really having demonstrated that 10% is possible, and be on a pathway with enough plants in construction that actually we've mitigated this investor uncertainty that we see in the market, and we're setting ourselves and the industry up for success as we go towards net zero 2050.
Yeah, thank you so much, Holly. I think this has been incredibly insightful, especially your perspective on scaling policy levers and supply and partnership post Flight 100. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing our conversation in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Thank you.